Hello, everybody. Welcome to another episode of the Tennis and Bagels podcast. This is your host, Vanch, and I'm joined as always, by my wonderful guest here, Steve Flink, a Hall of Famer and historian, someone that we have the pleasure of having on for every major. Steve, this was quite an eventful last 3 days of the tournament, not so much the first 12.
I totally agree, Vanch. We didn't do a lot of texting the first 12, but we did quite a bit the last three. And it was, I think we all deserved it. The tournament deserved it, and all tennis fans did. They were waiting for this. And if you recall, we didn't really get this kind of a conclusion so much, although the women were quite good at the end of the U.S. Open. But the men's was a fairly flat event. It just was a showcase for Carlos's great talent. But it didn't really ever come alive, I thought. But here, just a phenomenal finish.
Absolutely. And in this tournament, we had the top four seeds reach the semifinals. And, that was the first time since, I believe, 2019 Roland Garros. So it had been, almost 7 years. But we were treated to, I guess, the first semi, Alcaraz versus Zverev, which ended up being quite eventful as a result of Alcaraz really cramping, at the end of the third set. So what did you kind of make of the sequence of events there and the effort from both guys?
Yeah, I listened. It's funny. What I made of it was I thought that Zverev was he's a pro, he's a professional. He's always highly professional. He wasn't just gonna flat out quit in the third set, but he was very uh he was pessimistic. Let me put it that way. He was pessimistic. Why wouldn't he be? Because he had already had a 5-2 lead in the second set to get it back to one set all. Serve board at 5-3 and played a pretty poor game. And then at 5-all in the tiebreak, missed a pretty routine backhand volley down the line. It could have given him a set point. And then Carlos on the next point has stepped in and hit a typically audacious forehand to win the set. So that was a discouraging series of events for Zverev, who in his mind felt like he should have been a one set all. He'd also had not played a very bad game at 4-all in the first set on his serve, opening and closing with double faults. That didn't help either. But he could forgive himself for that if he would have bounced back and taken the second, which he had in his grasp. Okay, so that had all occurred prior to the emergence of these Carlos cramps. And then obviously the big issue arose, and Carlos, you saw him struggling, and Zverev saw him struggling, and Zverev was unhappy when the when he got a medical timeout, 5-4 in the third set. All of that would added a lot of drama. And meantime, Zverev is trying to figure out how he can get through this, and Carlos and exploit it. And Carlos is trying to figure out how to survive, but is very calm the whole time, very composed. So obviously, Zverev managed, after being 2 points in defeat a bunch of times and looked like he was going to lose there the end of the third. He got it into that tiebreak, and he played a good tiebreak, and so he's back in the match. And then we saw that fourth set unfold, Vanch. And in the fourth set, there were three times that Sasha had love 30. He had a 15-40. Carlos just stayed calm and took advantage of Zverev playing too many returns down the middle of the court, which enabled Carlos to just step in and blast winners. He was going for broke, but in a way, it sort of controlled, in a controlled way, as he often does. There's still like a high, for him, they're not such low percentage shots. But bottom line is, Zverev wasn't making him move that much. He was cautious. He wanted to be sure to get the returns back and make Carlos play. But in the process of doing that, he went a bit overboard on the conservative side. Meanwhile, he still served very well that whole set. So that was not an issue. Sasha was serving better and better. And Carlos was restricted, obviously, in how much his movement was restricted. His serving he lost a lot of velocity on serve. He was definitely in trouble, but he coped with it. So then another good tie break from Zverev, particularly from 3-4 down, those last 4 points, was very impressive. And he evens it up at 2-sets-all. And then, as you know, he gets that break in the first game of the fifth on a double fault from Carlos. The rest of the way was fascinating, Vaj, because up until Zverev served for the match, there were 3 straight service games where he had to bail himself out. Zverev did, from break point, or either 1 or 2 break points down. It was just harrowing for him, but he was being very aggressive. And there were a lot of flattened out forehands and type of shots we've always wanted from him. Backhand has never been an issue. The forehand, he tends to be on the tame side, and he tends to not have faith in hitting out freely, and it covers it too much. Not this time. Flattened it out when beautifully and was very aggressive off that side, and that's what got him to 5-3. But Carlos holds, and you can tell when they went to the changeover that Alcaraz, in his mind, he wasn't discouraged. And you could see in it also that Zverev maybe was not overconfident either, but you wondered, since he had not lost his serve since the 5-3 game in the second set, if he could keep that streak going, make it 18 service games in a row and close the match out. He wasn't up to it. And I think the mistake that he made, Vance, was just being, again, it was a certain caution. He got some first serves in, I believe 3 of them, but he did not really go for the lines on those serves. He didn't go for a ton of, he wasn't going for aces or service winners the way I think he would have been better off doing in his condition, because he was exhausted by that. As he said later, he was just thoroughly exhausted, debilitated, fatigued, however you want to put it. And he got broken at 15. And again, even in the short rallies that they had in that game, he wasn't really willing to take a risk off his forehand, and he left a couple short, and Carlos just stepped in, and Carlos played with controlled aggression that game. He didn't do anything overly fancy, and he got the break that he wanted. He held for 6-5, and then to Zverev's credit, Bunch, I thought it was impressive considering how depleted he was, that he came out at 5-6 and gave himself a game point to get in the tiebreak, pulled it a forehand inside in wide, and soon it was over. So just a remarkable match, one that looked like it was going to go Alcaraz's way, perhaps in straight, worst case in 4 before we found out the cramps had emerged. And then one that, as it progressed, you thought Zverev was, under these conditions, would win. But what did happen that I didn't mention was that gradually Carlos, over the course of the 4th, but really more so in the 5th, he regained his strength. He started serving bigger. He started moving better. He still was missing a lot of forehands, Carlos was, in the 5th, Bunch.
Yeah.
At that stage in the 5th, Zverev was better off the forehand than Carlos in a lot of ways up until he served for the match. And Carlos was missing, but you could tell the movement was there, the alacrity was there. He had all that going for him. So look, it turned out to be just a riveting skirmish and another great survival. I remember Ted Tinling, the late dress designer, and he was also chief of protocol at the major tournaments, very important historical figure in tennis. He used to call people that made those kind of got out of danger, like he called them the great escapeologist. Well, that's what Carlos was on that occasion. He escaped, and he didn't do it it was done with a lot of poise, reminiscent in some ways in a completely different kind of match and circumstances and opponent, but of the poise that he showed when he beat Sinner in the French Open final from triple match point last year, even more dire straits. But he has a way of just, no matter how bad things are, he keeps a smile on his face and he keeps competing, and he tends to make the right decisions at the crucial, dangerous moments in a match that make it most difficult for an opponent to win. So that's how I look at that match. In terms of Carlos, and it was another advertisement for his ability to compete under pressure. In terms of Zverev, it was another frustrating, I don't want to call it a failure, another frustrating defeat in the latter stages of a major for a man who's now been in 10 major semifinals. And that's the most anybody has done, hasn't won a major. And we keep thinking maybe it can happen. Frankly, I think it still can. And he didn't throw this one away. It was much more fatigue. I wouldn't call it nerves. I just think he made some wrong choices. In other words, in the last game when he was in the 5-4 game when he was tired, Vach, he could have just decided to go for those serves. I don't think he was afraid. I think it was a calculated decision that he would try to get some first serves in. He'd try to work the points. He just should have been more aggressive. So as far as he's concerned, I still hold out some hope that one of these days things can break for him, because he's a great player. And he showed, it had been 6-6 with him and Carlos. He showed that that's not really a total accident either. In the years to come, you have to believe Carlos will start winning against him more than losing. But it doesn't mean he's never going to lose to him again. Doesn't mean that Zverev can't have his day against Sinner here and there as well. So I think he'll come out of this in a good frame of mind, knowing he was so close to doing it, and that he competed well, and that he was doing it under difficult circumstances as he tried to gauge Carlos's condition.
Yeah, I mean,
But
the way I see Zverev is just I'm a little bit like I see the positives in his performance, and I also see the reason, why he hasn't made that final breakthrough. For instance, those tight moments really came in the second set this time for me, rather
yeah,
than the fifth.
right,
The second set is the set that he definitely should have won,
right,
and the
right.
first 8 games of the fifth set is the kind of tennis that won him all those big championships. Like that's the kind of tennis that he should be playing when it's time to close these matches out. But um, and obviously fatigue was a big factor for for the last 4 or 5 games. And Carlos, by the time I feel like by the time he made that scramble at 3-2 30 all in the fifth, that's when you knew his movement was like fully back.
Yeah, oh, no, yeah, that was a great point. That was an amazing point, amazing shot. One other moment from Zverev's standpoint, by the way, that I would cite that I think was kind of a shame was he's 3-1 up, Carlos serving 1-3, excuse me, Carlos serving 1-3, 15-30, and Zverev missed a very easy forehand. And that's a chance to maybe put yourself in a position to get an insurance break and feel much more comfortable about where you are. He tends to have his frailty at those moments too. I don't know if that's tension or just maybe and not enough intensity or recognizing what it was hard for me to know. But when you consider how well he was hitting the forehand through most of that set, that mistake to me was quite surprising.
Yes, that was a great opportunity for him to potentially have break points to go up double break. And
Yeah.
but from Carlos's standpoint, I really loved how he was celebrating the little wins along the way when he was struggling in the fourth set. Looking up at his camp, just showing that belief, that positivity, because it could have been so easy for him to just lose that set 6-2 or 6-3, and but he still kept it close and bought himself enough time to get to a point where he was able to find those reserves. And you know,
Yeah, listen, most of the time, Bunch, that's a good point. He has an amazing, uncanny way of doing that frequently. Not every time. There are times when he can get down on himself. There's been a few matches here and there, but they're infrequent. And I also think there's a purpose behind it. It's not gamesmanship, but he does want his opponent to know, I'm not done here. I'm not done. You're going to have to beat me. And he's sort of sending a signal. And as I say, I don't consider that a gamesmanship in the least, but he wants to send out that body language and that sense of, hey, I'm still here, and you've got a problem with me on your hands. And I thought he conveyed that very well. Of course, there was the moment earlier, of course, when they're on the changeover. I guess was it after the third or I think it was after the third, but Carlos thought that Sasha thought that it might be over, as they were changing ends, and
yeah.
that was just that was he just misconstrued, but I can understand why he thought it because it had that look. Carlos seemed to be stopping for a minute. He later explained that he just wanted to let Zverev cross over first, and so anyway, it was not on the level tennis-wise in terms of high standard tennis of the semifinal that followed, but it was still riveting and compelling and at times spectacular stuff from both.
Yeah.
So we got that just turned out to be a beauty and obviously they went over 5 hours and one wondered about Carlos's condition out there. But of course, there was some question: was it cramps or was it not? It clearly, in retrospect, was, and I think because it was that and was not some other injury, Carlos was able to recover quite well from it. And it would have been interesting had Zverev won to see what kind of condition he would have been in the final, being much older than Carlos and the tail end of his 20s. Would he have been how handicapped would he have been just from sheer exhaustion of what he went through on the Friday? That we'll never know. But it was certainly it was just gripping to watch that match into the wee small hours of the morning.
Yeah, absolutely. And it was another one of those major escapes where Alcaraz has now won 7 majors, and in 6 of those 7, he's been mere points away from defeat. In fact, in 2 of them, obviously he saved match point against Sinner, and he's been
Right.
close on a couple of occasions. But besides the U.S. Open, really last year, which he comfortably won, all the other 6 majors, he's at least had one moment in the match where it seemed like he might be out of the tournament, but he's just found a way every time.
Yeah, you're right. One match along the way, or sometimes, it certainly didn't look very good for him in the 23 Wimbledon final when he's down a set and Djokovic has got set point in the second set tiebreak. Yeah, no, he's grown accustomed to that. He accepts that, Vanch. He doesn't, for at least up until this stage of his career, it doesn't really create any strain. He accepts that and actually in some ways relishes it because he backs himself in when he's backed into those corners, he backs himself.
Correct.
And that's a great quality to have. And frankly, it does actually remind me in some ways of Djokovic that I think they both have an appreciation of winning those kinds of matches, and the lasting psychic value of coming through under those circumstances.
Yeah, absolutely. And the match that followed it obviously was a match where Djokovic, probably the biggest underdog going into a match that I can certainly recall in the last 15 years. With
Well, a certain tennis friend of mine sent a message to me conveying just that, and it happened to be you. And I read it. I read your text, and I thought back over all those years, and I absolutely agreed. There wasn't any doubt about it. And I think because of that, Vanch, and I think he was well aware, by the way. I think Djokovic was well aware that I guess he was an 8-1 underdog. He was well aware that there were a lot of skeptics out there, and that even he himself at one point had doubted if he could beat these guys in best of 5. But I think that just spurred him on. That and the question you got in the press conference about chasing,
lit a fire under him for sure.
yeah,
Yeah.
chasing Sinner and Alcaraz. He didn't like that, and so all those things just revved up his engines, and it just inspired him to play his best. But look, it was also, you look at the numbers, it's such an astonishing win, Vanch, when you consider that 76 winners for Jannik and 42 for Novak. You had Jannik at 75% first serves, winning 80% of those points. 26 aces from Sinner. He wins 12 more points in the match. Every single stat except for unforced was very similar. They had about the same number of unforced. You have 42 each. And second serve points one was almost identical, but otherwise the clear edge was to Sinner. But Djokovic saving 16 of those 18 break points that he faced, that was what obviously won him the match. And what's remarkable about it, Vanch, is that in the vast majority of those cases, at least 12, I'd say more. I mean, it was really just his own doing, his aggression, his serving. We go back to the first set, and a point that nobody will remember that well that I remember, because I think it could have been a whole different kind of match otherwise, was break point down for Djokovic at love 3, because he had lost 12 or 15 points at the start. He was 3 love before he knew it. And now he's in danger of getting broken again. If he gets broken again, it's 4 love. Sinner serves his way to 5 love, and it's probably a 6-1 set for Sinner.
Yeah.
And that could have been a devastating blow to Novak's morale to start the match in that fact. Instead, he comes up with an ace. He ends up holding on and plays him even the rest of the set. He holds his serve the rest of the way. It's a 6-3 set, and it was really important that he do that he establish himself there, just as it was when he played Rafa at Roland Garros, when he beat him in 21 in the semis, where Rafa was rolling to 5 love and Novak got back into that set, made it 5-3. He made it competitive, and that also boosted his psyche heading into the second set, and he eventually won it in 4 sets. But I thought that was the first big one. It was also, the other reason I mentioned is it was a sign of things to come in terms of what Novak was going to do when down break point and how often he was going to come up with the goods. And the second instance was at 3-1 in the second set. He'd gotten his first break of Sinner in the previous game, but he's immediately down love 40, and he played brilliantly to get out of that game and go to 4-1. And then he's saving break points the next time around in a 4-2. He was just terrific under. But in the 5-3 game was he served it out nicely. But I felt like the 3-1 love 40 was a big moment, and that was what has ended up getting him through the second set by and large, even though he was down break points the next time. And then again, then the next chapter is that he gets broken at 4 or 5 in the third. He didn't play a terrible game, but it was a little scoreboard pressure, and Jannik had served well that whole set and only had to save 1 break point himself. And so there he is down 2-1, but he still seemed very upbeat, Djokovic. He missed that backhand lob volley on the set point. Yeah. He tried his little drop shot lob volley combination that he liked so much, and it went long. And he doesn't miss the lob volley very much. He's got such great feel on his lobs that you don't expect him to ever miss it, but he did there. Not put off at all. And he immediately breaks at the start of the fourth set. And then we get we get another kind of incredible performance there in the fourth, the way he was escaping again. I mean, it was just, he's down 2 break points at 4-3, and the second one, it was a great serve and volley combination. He caught him off guard. Second serve and volley, beautiful first volley, overhead winner, easy, and he's out of that. And then even serving for the set was a tough game, but still was not. Still, the difficulties remain because Sinner was holding so easily in the first stage, his first 3 service games of the fifth set, and Novak had saved 5 break points in that span over 2 service games. And then I thought it was a really timely break that Djokovic got at 3-all. And once again, we get the second love 40 game for him that he holds. And that was crucial because this is 4-3 and he wants to keep it going and close it out. And he played that game remarkably well too. And finally at 5-4 when he served for the match, I thought that was also impressive because he had 40-15 and looked like that was fairly comfortable to have double match point, and lost a 18 stroke rally. And then on the second match point, he had a perfect serve that forced Yannick into a very short return. It was the sitter for Novak, but he came in and it was cross court. He could have played as a backhand, but he had time to get around, hit a forehand, and Yannick stayed home. Novak was convinced he was going to run to the open court. He didn't. So Novak's forehand went right back to Yannick, and Yannick hit a backhand down the line pass, and Novak was barely able to get that back, and then Sinner passed him on the next shot. So at the time watching, I thought, oh my God, because we all remember that Sinner at the end of 23 did have an escape against Novak from triple match point down in Davis Cup. And I crossed my mind when that second match point got away, is this going to happen again? But no, he hit a very good first serve at deuce, and Sinner's return was long. And then on the third match point, Yannick pulled a backhand cross court wide. So I thought, look, in terms of the recent years, Vaughn, certainly post 23, there's been nothing like this for Novak. He's had some really first-rate performances, but there's been no win that's been more exhilarating or more meaningful to him than that one. Would you agree?
Yeah, I think since the start of 2024, I'd probably put this
Yeah,
the highest just because of the match
right,
with Sinner and
right.
losing 5 in a row and being down 2-1 and at his age and, it being for a slam final.
Yeah, and 5 in a row, and not only 5 in a row, but there's the 24 Aussie where he was lucky to get a set off Yannick, and then the 2 last year at the French and Wimbledon where he didn't get a set. So most of these were
Yeah.
pretty decisive. They were decisive losses, and it seemed as if the matchup was tougher for him than his matchup with Carlos for a lot of reasons. So again, I think that was gratifying to him that he could prove that wrong. That when he played his best, he could still hang with Yannick from the baseline and hold his own to be sure, and that as long as he served well on the big points, he could win the match. But amazing when you think of the quality. Also, 5 sets. He loses his serve twice. He breaks Yannick 3 times. That was it for the entire 5 sets. A cleanly played match, and I think those in the Twitter world or whatever we want to call it online, those that like to commentate and let their views be known. I heard there was quite a bit of criticism of Sinner. I have a hard time fully understanding it because was he at his very best? No, but he played a good match, and he was outplayed by Djokovic, and it's 5 sets against a 10-time champion, and I don't think I don't really think he's going to lead. He'll be disappointed just from the standpoint of wanting to get in the finals and play Carlos in another major final. But in terms of the nature of the defeat, and I suspect when Darren Cahill sits down with him or anybody in his camp and they go back over what happened on those big points, he'll realize that he didn't really do that much wrong. He gave himself the openings, but that it was largely Djokovic's clutch play and rising to the occasion more than Yannick not doing what he needed to do. I mean, he should not be pointing the finger at himself over that, and I don't think he will be. I think he'll recover from that loss very quickly. But it was just a tremendous performance from Novak Djokovic.
Yeah, and what you mentioned about Sinner, I thought he played pretty high percentage tennis for the most part,
Yeah,
especially on those big points. I think you're very right that like 12 of those 16 are probably just Djokovic excellence.
right,
But
right.
but for Sinner, I think the pattern continues that he hasn't been able to win a match that's been over 3 hours and 50 minutes. Now, granted, I
Yeah.
always say that a lot of those matches were early in his career when I think physicality was more of a bigger problem. Whereas
Yes, it
now I
was.
think the Roland Garros final and this one, he just got outclutched and outplayed by
Wow. Yeah, you said it.
the
You said
competitors.
it.
But
In each case, out clutch, he didn't look physically drained to me in either of those matches. And you look back on Roland Garros, and after it seemed to have gotten away from him in the fourth set when he had the triple match point, and he goes down the break early in the fifth. He broke back when Carlos served for the match, and Yannick went ahead again 6-5 and was 2 points away at 6-5 in the fifth with Carlos serving that 12th game of the fifth. So, and as far as what happened in the ensuing tiebreak, that was just a magical display from Alcaraz and had nothing to do with Sinner being too weary. So I don't think he'll be worried. I think you're right. A lot of that is baggage from his earlier days, and I think he's very fit. But he does need to address the cramping
yeah,
that happened early in the tournament. That's he does seem to have an issue in the extreme heat. All players do, but they don't necessarily cramp up the way he did. And this cramping was really eerily reminiscent of Greek spore in Shanghai, and that had to be disturbing to him that it was hitting him so hard again. I mean, surely he and his camp were well aware of how hot it was. Surely they got him plenty of refreshments, plenty of liquids before the match to try to prevent this, and it didn't work. And what saved him was the roof. So that I'd be more concerned about that than the loss of Novak, because the loss of Novak was a great. You have to acknowledge a great performance on the other side of the net.
yeah, totally. And I mean, obviously there are going to be people out there that will say, Yannick is too predictable in those moments, or maybe he needs. But it's very hard for me to knock him for this because 99.9% of the time he doesn't even find himself in a position like this. Like he's just
Right.
so efficient and so deadly against most players that he's, in three of the first four majors that he won, he was barely pushed to like 3 hours.
That's
So
true.
he
That's
doesn't
true.
have a whole lot of, let's say, recent practice in these kind of situations, being in a fifth set. And to me, it does seem like Alcaraz and Djokovic do have something a little extra special in terms of that special sauce that you just can't really teach in terms of whether it's
Yeah.
a little extra
Agreed.
clarity or it's a little extra brilliance. And
Yeah, I
I do
agree.
feel like but I do feel like this stat of Yannick of being 0 for 9, like that's definitely going to change. It's one of those stats that
Oh, it'll change. And the other
no
thing,
more.
Vanch, is it's strange. We're talking about the physical aspect of it. I think psychologically, when he registers a couple of long 5 set triumphs and he starts winning some 4 or 5 5-hour matches, then that will just turn the tide for him. It doesn't mean he's going to win every one of them, but he'll get much better and he'll get much more sure of himself because he's proven to himself that he can do it.
Yeah, no doubt. But for Djokovic, it was definitely like you could make a case like top three, top five win of his entire career, just given the state that he's in right now. So, but
Yeah, I agree.
going into the final, I mean, there was still a question mark. I did feel like there like the stars could be aligning for him in the sense he got the walkover in the fourth round. Obviously, what happened with Lorenzo was pretty unfortunate for him, but it gave Djokovic a little bit extra in the tank in terms of his legs. And there was a question mark for Carlos, legitimately going into the final, of whether or not, obviously it was cramping, but you still didn't really know how he would fully recover or come out of the gates. And
Yeah,
oddly enough,
right.
I thought Djokovic played like an outstanding first set in the final, like just lights out, impeccable play. Just some of the best ball striking I've ever seen from him, serving like
And you know what?
barely missing. It's just a peak version of Djokovic that felt like if that continued, it was going to be really hard for Carlos too.
Yeah, absolutely. Look, he said it was one of the best sets he's played in the last few years. I'd put it more in your language. I think it was one of the best sets he's played in his career because when you consider that he wins 16 out of 18 points on serve, 93% of his first serve points, with 2 points lost on serve, period. Tagging every forehand with purpose, but real pace. Being really going for it outright. Not unnecessarily close to the lines, but really letting loose off the forehand and making 4 unforced errors in the whole set and 29 points to 15. It was remarkable, and it took him 33 minutes to get it done. And I don't think, Vanch, that he could have dreamed that that would happen. Sure, he was determined that he was going to get out there and win the first set. He didn't want to put himself down a set. So I don't think he would have been shocked afterwards you tell him that he won the set. But you have to figure in the back of your mind it's going to be a fairly long set. It might be a tiebreaker. It might be a 7-5 set. It might take over an hour.
Yeah.
So the fact that he got it done so fast, I think he was really feeling. That's why I think he said he was feeling great about himself when the first set ended. Is that was like the dream scenario for him to get off to this great start. And we all know, but he lost 41 matches coming in his whole career, won over 1,000. He had over a 96% winning record still does in matches where he's won the first set. And so he's an incredible front runner. He's the best of any player in the Open era. And so I think that's another thing he's well aware of, because I don't know if you remember, there was a video call that he did during COVID that was released to the public. And he was talking with other players. He had Stan Wawrinka on, and they had nice,
Yes.
and he had a joke. They're having this nice jovial talk, and Novak referred back to his losses to Stan in the 2015 Roland Garros and 2016 U.S. Open finals, and admitted that what really upset him about those losses was that he had won the first set in both cases. So you see what it means to him. That he doesn't, and I don't think he meant that arrogantly, like, well, nobody beats me if I win the first set, just that he's very confident under those circumstances and believes that he will close from there, no matter whether it's best of 5 or best of 3. And I think I think he probably felt that way after the first set here, even though he knows how much younger Carlos is, and we're talking about a 38-year-old versus a 22-year-old. But I still think he felt so sprightly is the word I would say, sprightly in the first set. The energy was there, the strength in his legs was there, the ball striking was perfect, the serving was immaculate. It was all in place. But of course, as we've seen so many times, then the question becomes, okay, can you sustain it? And the other question becomes, what will Carlos now do by way of adjustment?
Yeah.
Because he's very good. For instance, Carlos in the second set of the Wimbledon final against Novak in 23, Carlos in the first set had gone for broke on a lot of forehand returns, particularly those deuce court forehand returns, and he'd missed a lot of them by wide margins. He was, and that hurt him for sure. And it was a 6-1 set to Novak. And then in the second set, Carlos really started. By the second set and the third, he started really giving a lot more air, putting a lot more air on his returns, getting more of them back. He changed his positioning. He made the adjustments well there. Now the difference was that on that occasion, Djokovic still played a really good second set, and he made what proved to be a fatal error on a set point in the tiebreak on a backhand cross court into the net take. But that's what I would have thought would have been more the case here, that we would have seen a very tight second set, because Carlos inevitably was going to improve and find his range and get his bearings. But I thought Novak would be able to, I believe that he thought so too, that he thought he was going to be right in there. But it was not the case. Novak had that love 30 in the first game that Carlos alluded to later, where he saw a couple of forehand errors, and it kind of encouraged Carlos to think he had a shot here. And Novak still held on in that game, but he got broken the next time around and broke it again later in the set. It was almost as easy, not quite, for Carlos to win the second as it was for Novak to win the first. So suddenly, after another 36 more minutes, barely longer than the first set, it's 1 set all. Yeah. And I think Djokovic was still struggling, whatever was going on with him. There was no kind of serious injury or limping around. You didn't worry about him too much, but something was going on internally, and he alluded to it after the match. Something was bothering him, and he was surprised by whatever it was. And then in turn, Carlos was playing so much better, serving so well, serving so accurately. And Carlos then settled down, Vanch, off the ground. And he'd had 9 unforced errors in the first set, 18 the rest of the way. And that was proof of the discipline and the intelligence with which he played, because he turned it into a different kind of a match. I felt the first set was more of a slugfest. Novak wanted that. Novak wanted to beat him to the punch, and Carlos wanted to answer. It was like macho tennis in a way. Carlos wanted to answer with big blows of his own, big shots of his own. Novak was better at that. Novak just outplayed him. The points were short. That's the other thing about the first. So there were no long points. The rallies got gradually longer because Carlos decided he was going to play it differently and he was going to hit higher trajectory shots and prolong the rallies
More
and
shape on his forehead.
more shape and force Novak to play, play these longer points. So it was the combination of the fact that he did that. He went to the more of a percentage tennis game and sort of changed the texture of the rallies, the nature of the rallies. And Novak was just not as sharp, and he didn't do anything as well in the second set. And Carlos was decidedly better in every facet of his game. And then I thought the third was interesting, Vanch, because it looked like it was Carlos had that. He got the break in the middle of the set, and then he had Novak down 3-5, love 40, and at the end of the set. And that was a big game because if Novak can hold, at least he can start serving the fourth set conceivably. And he made a big push to get out of that game and saved 4 set points, and had a couple of game points. But then finally, after 4 deuces, Carlos gets the break. Carlos persisted to get that break. And then that did enable Carlos to get out to the immediate hold in the next set. And then Djokovic, of course, gets in a 6-deuce game and saves 6 break points. That was a brave stand from Novak. This time, Novak prevailed, unlike 3-5 in the third. That was a huge hold for Djokovic. And I think that sort of gave him that's where he felt rejuvenated to get that hold there. And then he had a couple of easier holds. And finally, at 3-4, he was down love 30, and he played very well to hold on that game to 4-all, and then had break point. Djokovic did it 4-all, and that's the one time where he would be self-critical, I think, of a particular point in the match. It's true that he could have broken back in the second set. He had a break point to break right back and missed an aggressive shot, but this was much bigger. This was a chance to break for 5-4 and serve for the fourth set if he does so. And it was a pretty routine cross-court forehand. As he said later, I had a good look at that forehand. And that was his way of saying, I should have made it. And he wasn't really going. What was surprising to me about it is he hit it hard, but it wasn't really going it wasn't going to be an outright winner. It wasn't like he sort of rolled the dice. He just missed. And then Carlos hit that, what I think was kind of a bizarre winner, but I don't know if it was necessarily an accident because nothing he does ever surprises me anymore. In the sense that it was he had a forehand from near the middle, behind the baseline, but near the middle of the court, and it landed inside Novak's service line, just inside the sideline for a winner. And the commentators were speculating about that. Was it a miss hit? Was it an accident? No, I frankly don't think it was a miss hit, and I don't think it was an accident. I think sometimes he invents angles, and that was one of those times where Carlos invented an angle. And then he won the next point. And I thought Djokovic did a great job at 4-5 serving to stay in the match to win that game. Very aggressively played game. But Carlos was imperturbable at this stage because he just wasn't giving Novak enough openings to break. The 4-all was the one chance. And he gets to 6-5 and wins that 24-stroke rally on Novak's serve to start the game. And then from there, Djokovic unraveled off the forehand, as he had acknowledged later. His forehand went a little bit off. And Carlos closed it out again with the right tactics, with the right idea of saying, no, I'm not going to take foolish risks here. I think Novak might be a bit worn out. I think I can coax the errors from him. And he did just that. But the good news, the good news for Carlos, he didn't have to play a fifth. He closed it out in 4. He had his 7th major. He gets his career Grand Slam, the youngest ever to do it. Good news for Djokovic. He made it very competitive. He didn't fade away after the first. If he'd lost the last 3, 2, 3, and 3, I think he would have been very disappointed. But the fact that he raised his game a second time there in the fourth, played his second best set of the match. And it was the best set of the match in terms of on both sides of the net. First set was just an exemplary showcase display from Djokovic, but in the fourth set was that they both were playing well at the same time in a way that was never the case the rest of the match. So it was a good way to end it. It would have been nice if it went to a tie break, but Carlos prevented that from happening. So I thought, was it as riveting as the Sinner match? No, but it was still there was still so much sparkle. And there is every time that Alcaraz and Djokovic play, the shot making and the decision making and the tactical acuity, all of it, the way they're trying to outthink each other. Both of them are very cerebral in their respective ways. So I thought, as usual, it was a joy to watch them play. And the only thing we missed out on, which would have been nice, was a tiebreak in the fourth and maybe having the match continue to a 5th set. But overall, I'm not going to complain.
Yeah, absolutely. It was really enjoyable just to see the the chess from both players and the way they were responding to each other. Carlos having to respond and make adjustments to the level that Djokovic was playing, Djokovic raising his level in the fourth, and also the around the net post rally was quite an awesome point from both. I mean, Djokovic ended up losing
Yeah,
it, but he played such a big
yeah,
point, and
he
Carlos was
did,
just
he
there,
did.
and
Yeah,
there
yeah,
were a lot of
yeah.
events.
I mean, Novak, he hit it seemingly hard enough, but not, Carlos got over there and flicked that forehand in the open court. No, it was a great point. There was a lot. There were many points that were really exhilarating in that way, and they never let us down in that regard. But look, it was one of their better matches. Obviously, we had the Olympic, that wonderful spectacle of the Olympics and the two tie breaks with Novak winning. We had Carlos winning a 5-set Wimbledon final. We had what I thought we had a good ending to the Carlos Novak quarterfinal a year ago in Australia too. And I mean, people talked about Carlos maybe being a little thrown off because Novak had gotten injured and he was trying to adjust. But in the fourth set, they both played very well in the fourth set of that match too. So I just feel like they never really let us down. Novak just wasn't ready for the 24 Wimbledon final for whatever the reasons, the knee. Who's to say exactly what? And Carlos was incredible for up until winning a couple of 6-2 sets and serving for the match and triple match point in the third, and they finally got a tiebreak. So that was maybe one of their less compelling matches. But most of the rest, from the first time they met in Spain on the clay back in 22, and Carlos winning in a third set tiebreak, right up through this one, they just had some dandies.
Yeah, absolutely. And I love how the tournament started and concluded, because you had the tournament start with Federer, of course, coming for to the Australian Open after 6 years. Saying
Right,
goodbye to
right.
him. And the tournament finished with Nadal being in the crowd watching this match, and it was kind of like you had the big three all at once, and then Carlos and
Yeah, and you
Carlos
had
there to finish to get the career slam. It was just like a special moment for a fan.
yeah, totally agree. It was nice to have Rafa there. It was nice for Novak and Carlos to acknowledge Rafa. And in the Federer exo doubles, you mentioned about him coming over, and he plays that exhibition doubles, and
Yeah,
Agassi's having problems with his racket, and Ash Barty comes out to replace Agassi, and there's Rafter, and there's Hewitt, and everybody enjoying it. And Djokovic came to watch that, and Roger came over and shook Novak's hand. So that was a nice moment too. I mean, those three guys have been through so much together that it was nice to see those shared moments of respect.
yeah, for sure. And obviously, we look at Carlos's numbers now, having being the youngest to complete the career slam. I mean, it's crazy to think
Yeah.
he could do two of these. Like, he could do a double career slam next year in Australia. Like, it's and obviously, like, I mean, in the Djokovic, Nadal, Federer era, like, Rafa had such a stranglehold on RG that it was basically, he was so inevitable there that it was so hard to
Yeah.
do this twice. And
Yeah.
Djokovic was so dominant at the Australian Open, so it was so, in some ways, it was a lot harder to do it back then. But to see Carlos still come that, like, do this at 22, and the count that he has right now, there's no
Well, but you make an
telling what he can
important.
do in terms of.
You're sorry, Raj. Go ahead.
Yeah, no, I was just gonna say, in terms of the rate at which he's winning these majors.
Yeah, no, but you see, you're making an important point because he already has two, and people forget he's got
Yeah,
all the rest, two of all the rest, two at all, and that's forgotten too quickly when people talk about the Slammers. They already had the double wins everywhere else,
yeah,
so it only takes one more win in Australia, so which will inevitably come. If it's not next year, it'll be sometime soon enough. So yeah, no, it's going to be a very interesting year from here in terms of what Novak can do to build on what he did and to give himself the hope to maybe come through and win an eighth Wimbledon. What happens to Sinner in the way, and I fully expect Sinner to bounce back in a big way, and I'm not worried about him brooding over this loss or letting it sort of cut into his confidence in any serious way. And then Carlos obviously flying high, but knowing that he can't let his guard down either, as gifted as he is. So I think we're in for a treat the rest of 2026.
yeah. For me, I think the most interesting thing is how does Sinner respond to, I guess, not winning both these hardcourt slams. So,
Yeah,
for him,
you're
and
right.
then for him to go to the career, like, to complete the career slam at Roland Garros. I mean, yeah, it's going to be
Yeah,
interesting
he's
to see how
got.
he responds. And because he didn't play for 3 months last year, he has a lot of room to gain in the rankings. And Carlos has a nice, like, 3,000 point cushion. But I think the Sinner response part is going to be very interesting to see.
Yeah, I'm not worried about him, Vanch. I get your point because in between the two hardcore majors, he beat Carlos in the year end. And yes, Carlos was a bit hobbled in that match, but it was still a very good performance from Jannik
Yeah.
and a much needed win indoors. So he finished the year by
Oh, he
winning
finished the year
there.
amazing. Like post US
Yeah.
Open was just he just ran through the table. It was
He ran through the table, so it's not he won't be that shaken. I think frankly he's gonna be so happy to get back to Indian Wells in Miami and those tournaments that he couldn't play last year during the suspension that we'll see him recover pretty quickly. I think he's got a very strong disposition, a good temperament, and very good people around him. So I don't think he's going to let this loss linger long, particularly if he puts it in perspective. And Cahill, I think, can really help him do that, having seen Djokovic play as much as he has, to just remind Jannik, look, that was a splendid performance, and you have nothing to be ashamed of. So I'm optimistic, aren't you? That Jannik will
yeah.
recover quickly. Yeah.
Yeah, very optimistic. I think he'll be
Yeah.
right back in the thick of it in the finals or winning these titles. But yeah, I mean it does make it interesting that we've had like I guess 9 slams in a row with these two, sweeping them. And if you had told me, at the start of the year I probably would take these four, I would probably have them split it again, but I just
Yeah.
now it's a different complexion with Alcaraz getting the Australian, and we'll see if one of them can get 3 this year, and if it's 2-2 and which 2 they win. Like it definitely feels like, I mean, we could have had a Djokovic-Zverev final here, but it's like just, it became awfully so close. Like you mentioned the Musetti match, but also the Alcaraz cramps and also the Sinner Spizzirri situation. Like for a tournament that didn't deliver competitive matches in the first 12 days, it still had these storylines, made it, which made it not as inevitable that we were going to end up with a Sincaraz final. And so,
No. Look, obviously there was a surprise in development. So, and I felt like I did feel like Djokovic was seemingly the beneficiary of a good break when Menchik had a default. But then all those days off, I don't think did him any good at all, because I think he was very uneven against Musetti, and it was windy, and
yeah.
Musetti played very well. He's a very guileful player. He knows what he's doing out there. He mixed things up well. He's very fast. And he had Novak down those 2 sets before Novak went up a break in the third, and Musetti had to retire. So that was a shocker. But I honestly think that I wonder whether Djokovic would have played a good deal better had he actually played Menchik, because I think that sometimes you lose your rhythm. Sometimes that's not the best thing that can happen to you, even at his age, to have that too many days off. But what was impressive was the way he put that behind him and just was a totally different player against Sinner. And that's what I liked about that episode, is that he didn't, he knew he'd been fortunate to get out of that, but then he just said that, he just moved on and got himself geared up for Sinner and pulled off, as you say, what could be one of the top 5 victories of his career when he looks back. He might believe that when it's over. I'm fascinated to see, when all is said and done, what he will say about, I mean, I know one thing I'm certain of is that he will cite, because he's already done it a few times in different interviews, but I think he'll cite Australia 2019. The 2012 Rafa match was an epic, 5 hours and 53 minutes, but in 2019, he beat Rafa, crushed him in straight sets in the final. And I think he believes, and I think he should believe, that that's the best tennis match he's played in his entire
That
career.
first set that he played against Carlos, I instantly thought about that match.
Yeah. Well, the first set against Carlos was reminiscent. It was very similar.
Yeah. But another player who didn't make the final four, but has just had a remarkable rise the last 1 year, is Leonard Tien. I've been super impressed with his development. Obviously we knew last year he could manipulate the ball really well. He was super fit, fast. He could cause a lot of guys trouble. He was lefty. He's just such a smart player, cerebral player. But this year I feel like his shots have a lot more sting. His serve has improved so much, and it still has room to get much better. And I was very impressed by how he played the whole tournament, particularly the match against Medvedev, where he just thoroughly outplayed and dominated him, for at one point winning 11 games in a row. And also the way he played from the back of the court against Zverev was very impressive. He couldn't hold his own in the serve and return dynamic quite just yet, but it was impressive how close he got to a fifth, and just
Well, you heard,
he's rising.
yeah, you sized it up well, Bunch. You heard what he said, Zverev, afterwards. He basically said there's nobody better from the backcourt than Lerner Tien, and that was quite a compliment. And he said he wouldn't have won it if it hadn't been for his 24 aces and his great serving.
No.
And I think that's true because he really did struggle. What amazed me is if you look back, Vanch, to last year and go back in the eye of your mind to Lerner beating Medvedev last year, and that one being a treacherous five-setter, just a war from the baseline and long, tough points. I felt at that time the way he played was more to just he could counter you, he could run down balls, but I didn't think his forehand was not nearly as good. He can dictate with his forehand now in a way that he really couldn't then. And I think that's what made life so difficult for Daniel this time around was that he could backhand to forehand being Lerner being a lefty. Daniel was getting killed in that pattern. And he just couldn't find a way to impose himself in any way from the backcourt, and that's what led to the 11 games in a row that you mentioned. But Zverev used his experience and being a better server than Daniel. The serve was the key, and he needed it, and he got through it in 4 sets. It was very close to set point down to going to a 5th set. So it was no easy task for Zverev to win that match, and it makes me think that Lerner might move up the ranks faster than I'd anticipated coming into this year. Now, I honestly believe that he has a shot at concluding this season in the top 10 in the world.
Yeah. Before this year, I would have said somewhere in the 12 to like 15 to
Right.
20 range, but now I'm thinking 10. Like I definitely
Yeah.
think it's very possible. And
Yeah,
he's gonna
because
do
he's
better
gonna
on the clay and grass than he did last year for sure. Because that was his
he
first
should.
time around it.
Yeah, and as you said, his serve is better. That was the other thing that impressed me is that Sasha was having no easy time on the returns either. And I think that surprised Sasha. And that's the service is. I think Chang has worked on it. They've worked on it together. It's beefed up. Everything is looking up for him because he's only going to continue to get better. There's no reason he can't, and he has a great attitude. He didn't come away dismayed or distraught after this loss. You could tell he was pleased that he had a good tournament and he'd given it his all against Sasha. And with a little luck, he would have been in a 5th set. So I think he should feel very good about himself right now. And as you say, the other surfaces is going to do better, but in the meantime, he's going to have some nice hard court events coming up where he can make an impression. And Indian Wells and Miami, he could do very well.
Yeah, there's no doubt about it. I think the other thing that was exciting to watch in the first week of the tournament was actually Stan Wawrinka. Like, in his final go around, getting the love that he was getting from the crowd and just battling through the 5-set match against Arthur Gaya, the Frenchman, and just how well he started the year at the United Cup as well. There seems to be, ever since he announced his retirement, there seems to be like a burden kind of lifted off his shoulders, and he's playing a lot freer. And it's just been fun to watch. And because you think of all the history that he made in Australia and those, particularly the 3 matches he played against Djokovic, that's what really stands out to me. And it just brought back a lot of those memories.
Well, yeah. I mean, the 3 matches against Djokovic, all 13, 14, 15, all of them 5-setters and all of them gems. Yeah, no, look, the crowds remember that. The longtime Australian observers remember that, and sentimentally they were on his side, and he played pretty well against Taylor Fritz. He got his set, and it was a classy way for him to go out. And I think he's going to have sporadically some decent results this year, Bonchi. He won't regret that he's hung around. I think that he can have a pretty good year, and with some luck, maybe Stan could finish the year somewhere about 50 in the world.
Yeah, that certainly seems doable. Though he's certainly playing top 50 tennis to start the year. So,
Yeah,
um, but yeah, I mean, I want to shift over to the women's side. Obviously, Elena
sure.
Rybakina continuing her awesome form from the WTA finals and post US Open stretch last year, and I think she's won her last 10 matches against top 10 players, and particularly doing it again in the final against Sabalenka. But I also want to go to the Jessica Pegula match because Pegula was playing some phenomenal tennis, during the tournament, taking out Keys and Anisimova, power players, and she'd made such a valiant effort from Pegula to come back from 2 match points down 3-5 in the second set and have 2 set points of her own. But I thought Rybakina's composure in the big moments, and what's impressing me most about Rybakina is her forehand used to break down a lot more, but now I feel like she's added a little bit more margin and spin on that shot, and it just doesn't break down in the big moments anymore. You add that to her serve and how good she is off the ground and her return, it's a very complete package.
Yeah, I agree. I mean, I think when she was playing well in the past, it's hard to gauge. There are times there will be times ahead where the forehand will still go off at times, I suspect. Not a lot of margin for error, but it was awfully good this whole tournament. And you don't think of her as the fastest player, but boy, she seems to be able to orchestrate points where she doesn't have to get involved in. She's able to sort of use her power and accuracy and depth and angles to prevail in these points before somebody can really outmaneuver her and make her move too much. So yeah, the complete package was there, and it's true. Saving the match points against, I mean, just saving those match points together, it could have been haunting because she had twice the chance to serve it out and didn't. And then the tie break, the two set points. So it was harrowing at the end of that set because had she lost that set, considering that Pegula had not lost a set and the tournament and beat Keys and Anisimova really impressively.
No.
I think just it would have been like maybe I might have said I would say maybe it would have been 52-48 in Pegula's favor in the third set. It would have been very close, but I would have
No.
liked her chances at that point. So yeah, and then fascinating because we remember so well the 3-set loss that Rybakina had against Sabalenka when they played in the Australian final a few years back, and now they go at it again, and it's another hard-fought, tight, well-played match. And what I love about their matches, Vanch, is that they're both such good servers, but particularly Rybakina, but Sabalenka has a very good serve too. And
Yeah.
so often these sets, often in two of the sets, it came down to one break. It was a break against Sabalenka in the opening game of the match. She lost her first service game, and that cost her the set. And then they went to 4-all in the second set, and Sabalenka won 5 games in a row from there. So that meant it was just that one break at the end against Rybakina in the second, but she immediately goes down that break in the third. So when she's down 3-love in the third, having lost 5 games in a row, and she's at 30-all in the fourth game, and of course, the famous moment where her coach yelled over her about more. Did he say more energy?
Yes, more energy.
More energy. Well, two simple yet profound words because the message got through, and you did sense from that point on that Rybakina did have more spark, and she did come up with a couple of great serves right off the bat to get that crucial hold to keep it at 3-1. And then she goes on this run. So she won 6 of the last 7 games
Yeah.
from love 3 down in that third and served it out beautifully. And, closed with that ace out wide in the ad court. And it was a very impressive performance. And she's been building toward this. We sort of saw signs along the way, Vach. That great match she had against Iga at the French last year that she lost 7-5 in the third after a blazing start. I think 6-1, 2-love. She was killing her, and then Iga fought back. And then you mentioned the year-end championships. That was the biggest step, where she beat Sabalenka in the final there too, and beat Pegula in a great 3-set semi. Had a lot of good wins in that tournament. So yeah, this didn't happen by accident. It didn't happen overnight. It wasn't suddenly getting hot. She's been hot. So I feel like she can make something of this. It's her second major. Can she win another this year? She's got a shot. She definitely has a shot. I wouldn't expect it to be Roland Garros, but Wimbledon and the Open, she's never done herself justice at the Open, but Wimbledon, she's won it before. So a second one is entirely possible, and I would expect her this year to be ready for the U.S. Open as well. So it's nice that we kind of have her in. She's right in that upper crust, Vach, with Sabalenka obviously still being the preeminent player in women's tennis, but Pegula is up there. Obviously, we know Coco, won the French last year. Anisimova lost to Pegula this time, but she's right in there. There's a very strong cast of 6-7 players at the top right now. And Rybakina is right in there with them. And frankly, the professionalism she's showing now and avoiding injuries, I can see Rybakina actually being a candidate. She'll contend. I wouldn't be shocked if she contended for number 1 this year. Whether she can outdo Sabalenka in consistency, I don't know, but I think she can make a bid. And I think she's that good right now.
Well, yeah, and she seems to really, so far, at least in the last 3 years, get the better of the matchup. She's won 7 of their last 11, and
yeah,
she's now won her last couple against Iga, and there's no player right now that she can't really beat when she's in form and playing well. So, and yeah, you're so right about the top 6 who all made the quarters, and it seems like Sabalenka's the most consistent, but any number of these 6 players can really win a title a big title in any given week right now. And I guess for Sabalenka, the main question is just when she gets to the semis and finals of these majors, you can almost pencil her into the semis. I mean, she's been into the
Yeah.
13 of the last 14, something crazy like that. Like her,
Yeah. Yeah.
it's just been really good. But then, now she's 4-4 in major finals, and she lost a couple last year, and I think she has some of that mental scar tissue in some of these big moments, just from those losses. But I do feel like in this one, it went from 3-love to 3-5 so quickly, and she had the one chance to go up 4-2 with that backhand return on the second serve that
Yeah.
was just a little bit wide. But I mean,
Yeah, look, she went for that. She went forward cross because she missed it, and she had that look on her face where she she couldn't really complain. She hit it as well as she could, just about as well as she could. She was just narrowly off the mark. Those things happen. But yeah, it happened quickly. But when you're playing Rybakina, who can hit a lot of service winners and aces and can end points pretty swiftly, that can happen. That can happen before you and in turn, the other problem, Vanch, is that and all the top players know it. I don't think it reminds me of a player being up 30-love in an individual game. 3-love is misleading, just like 30-love is. And it's a little bit deceiving. And you kind of think you're just about there, but you're not. It was only one break. So it would have been very different if Sabalenka could have gotten that second break for 4-love. She would have been in a comfortable and commanding position. But it's not as safe as it seems on paper. It just looks so big in our eyes and in the players' minds, but not necessarily so.
yeah, absolutely. And I guess a couple of other players I want to touch on. I mean, so obviously Coco wins Roland Garros last year. She has a few good tournaments, like she won Wuhan. She's played well in some individual matches. United Cup against Iga, but I just feel like it's been so up and down for her since Roland Garros, and we've not seen that sort of stability in her game. With the forehand and the serve, obviously, and this was just a really appallingly poor performance from her against Svitolina, who played a great match, but certainly like day to day, it's the difference between her golf ceiling and floor seems to be really high right now, and you don't quite know which one is going to show up.
Well, you described it so well, Vanch. Appallingly poor is about as precise a way as you can put it. And I felt the same way about her performance against Naomi at the U.S. Open.
Yeah.
Naomi just peppered her forehand. Naomi played beautifully, and she did what she needed to do, but it was not terribly difficult to pull off that win. And it's shocking when you consider the work that's been put in. At least at the Open, everything was still so new with Gavin, with her coaching and the technical details that she was attending to, that you can understand why she was a bit confused out there. I didn't expect to see something like that from her here in the first major this year after all those tournaments in the fall and all the off season and the time to prepare and get used to any technical changes that have occurred. So I was surprised. It's baffling because she's so capable, and when she's on, she's such a pleasure to watch. But it was painful to watch her there against Svitolina because the self-destruction was just, and it got to the point, Vanch, where she had to just basically baby the first serve in, is how I would put it. A second serve first, but just was so afraid to hit her serve at that point. I had no faith in it, that she just had to figure out a way to start the point and go from there. And the forehand was really unraveling, and it's a shame. She had won a couple of 3-setters leading up to that, so she hadn't been playing great, but we've seen her so many times. Look at that first U.S. Open, all those 3-setters she played in that tournament, culminating with a win, come from behind 3-set win over Sabalenka in the final. So that can happen, but here it caught up with her here, Vanch. The fact that she had struggled in the previous rounds, and I agree with you. It's been disappointing since Roland Garros, and she made her coaching change. She seems at times to believe in herself, and there are other times where she just loses all faith. And that's where she was in Australia. And we'll see where it goes from here. Nothing will surprise me. I do think not impossible for her to defend the French, but I think it's going to be very difficult for a variety of reasons. And there'll be a lot of players that on their day can beat her there, even though Coco is a great clay court player.
Yeah, no doubt about it. Maybe at the U.S. Open or like post U.S. Open, we'll see some good runs for her. But and maybe she's very capable on doing something at Wimbledon too. It's just been a tough surface for her.
Yeah, it has. It has. I often wonder though, with the extreme grip, or the part, is that part of the problem at Wimbledon, the extreme forehand Western grip. Maybe that's one of the reasons we haven't seen better from her there. But on the other hand, when her serve is on, when her first serve is on, she's getting high percentage in. That can be quite a weapon on the lawns of Wimbledon. But so far, it has not gone well for her there. You're right. One of these years, it could turn around.
Yeah. Speaking of Wimbledon, I mean, the reigning Wimbledon champion Iga Swiatek. I mean, she was playing. She obviously she won Wimbledon, she won Cincinnati, but since then I do feel like really the main story for her has just been trying to find that right balance between kind of playing her counter punching offensive game, playing the offensive game that she did play from 2022 to 2024, and then relying more on her athleticism and defense and counteracting the big hitters, which is something she's tried to work on with Wim. And I just feel like she's kind of caught in between two minds right now. And it seems like the aura that she once had against these top players has slowly started to fade the last 5 or 6 months. Like they've all started to beat her multiple times now. Like Gauff has beaten her 4 times. Sabalenka has 2 wins in a row. Anisimova has 2 wins in a row. Andreeva, like you could go down the list in the top 10. And it just feels like they're not really afraid of her right now. And the Rybakina match, I thought Iga played well in the first few games, and it was a close first set. But
Oh, listen,
uh,
I don't think just the first few games. I thought she played a good first set period, but then after the set got away 7-5, she got blitzed in the second, and Rybakina
but didn't
served
you
all.
think the problem was that at 5-6 she didn't make a single first serve? She went like
Yeah,
oh
well,
07.
obviously, yeah, but I kind of understood. She was feeling the pressure a bit. She was, scoreboard pressure, try to get to the tie break. It's true. She didn't serve a good game there, but I'd say overall, she played a good
Yeah.
set. And frankly, I thought after that set, it was still good. I didn't think it was in the bag for Rybakina. I thought the second set could be very close. I thought Iga might even win it, but she was never in the second set. You described it well, the kind of dilemma she has right now in figuring out how to play. And I don't know. I was very optimistic after Wimbledon, and I think that Anisimova beating her at the Open was jarring. When you'd beaten her so commandingly at Wimbledon, and she knew it would be a much tougher match with him. And then losing Anisimova at the end of the year in the Euro Championships again. Yeah, there's a bunch of players that are going to be difficult for her. On the other hand, we know she's a great champion, and her time to sort of regroup and reassemble and put things right is going to be coming up in the spring when she gets back on the clay. And I have to believe her results on clay this year will be far better than what we saw a year ago. And will it be enough to carry her to another French Open title? I don't know, but obviously she's going to be right in there. She's going to still be very hard to beat in Paris.
Yeah, I definitely still expect her to make a big move in the next 2 or 3 months. It just feels like she's kind of overdue, and she didn't play so well this time last year, so she can certainly make up that ground. And yeah, it's an exciting time in the women's game. The top six are so strong, and then you also have players like Iva Jovic, who I think at this point could also make a push to the top 10 this year.
Yeah,
She
she looks
make a
she,
dip.
she looks capable. I mean, eh, she's still so young and inexperienced, and yet it did not show in Australia at all. What a great tournament for her. I agree. There's a chance for top 10. If not, she will. There's no way she won't be top 15. And she's fun to watch. She made quite an impression this tournament. But the last comment on Iga, I think she's puts too much pressure on herself, Blanche, is my ultimate analysis. Sometimes I watch her setting up to serve, and it's hard to watch because you feel like she's so tense. And I think she got past that for a while. I mean, in that period, Wimbledon was terrific because she was Towson, it was Bencic, it wasn't just the final. She played a great tournament at Wimbledon, and some really top-notch performances. And it freed her up, and she felt great about herself. And I just wish somehow she could she's got to realize if she retires tomorrow, she's had a phenomenal career. And the only, we've had the dominance in Paris. She hasn't been able to break through here, but she's won the Open. She's won Wimbledon. What a career. And just relax a bit and go easy on yourself, and don't expect. The one thing I would tell her if I was in her camp is, it's okay if you don't dominate the game. It's even okay if you're not number one,
Right.
but just get the best out of yourself.
Yeah, no, I certainly feel it feels like there's a lot of tension in her body and her um in her mind in some of these matches lately. But I think she'll bounce back. I have a good feeling about that. But yeah, I mean, my circadian rhythm is also going to need to bounce back after this Australian Open. Obviously, with the with the tournament finishing, we still have quite a lot to look forward to. So I'm excited about that, and Indian Wells and Miami coming up, and the clay swing.
Yeah, I am too. I am too. I think it's going to be a lot of great tennis, and the women are in a good place, Raj. I will say that there's stability there now. I mean, yes, we get different winners at slams, but we're getting some repeat winners. And Sabalenka is always in there playing in these finals, and Coco's not going away, and Iga's not going away, and Anisimova is going to recover from her loss to Jess, and Jess has become such a. She's getting better and better at the majors. She had a couple of tough results last year in the majors, but finished so strong again at the Open with the semi, and now opens with another semi. And so, I mean, I'm just encouraged that some of these leading players, that the reliability of the leading players, and what fun that could be in terms of the remaining majors. And then we already discussed the scenario for the men, with terms of Carlos and Yannick, and can Novak make that bid at Wimbledon. So I think we're in for a great year in both the men's and women's games. No doubt about it.
I think one more thing I'll add about the men's is I'm excited to see the return of Jack Draper and Arthur Fils.
Yes, yes.
Both those players will if they can stay healthy, they will make an impression in the next few months as well.
Well, it was a shame what happened to Jack. It was a shame what happened to both of them, because Fils was so impressive out on the clay and so dynamic to watch. One of the most charismatic players I've seen, and one of the most crowd pleasing players I've seen as well. And then you had Jack, who this really tenacious left-hander who'd worked so hard to get himself into the top 5 and played so great on the clay last spring, and great and fantastic what he did at Indian Wells. And then, of course, post Wimbledon was just a wipeout for him, one match at the Open. So I'm really happy to see him come back. And I hope he gets a sustained period of good health. I hope they both do. That there's no re-injury for Draper, because he was I was so encouraged about where he was headed. And hopefully it won't take him too long to get going again.
Yeah, hopefully. Steve, this has been a lot of fun. It's been so great recapping these majors with you, and I look forward to doing the next one after Roland Garros.
Yes, thanks, Vanch. Enjoyed it immensely, as always.